those seniors who receive their meals. This collaboration comes at a time when it is needed most. Information about the foundation and the programs offered is at gonzabafoundation.org. This nonprofit message is underwritten by the Gonzaba Foundation. Support for TPR comes from Contemporary at Blue Star, where artist Mark Minjavar will present a manifesto writing workshop on reimagining one's community and the future itself, February 28th at 1 p.m. Registration at contemporarysa.org.
Texas Public Radio is KSTX San Antonio, KTXI Ingram, KVHL Llano, KTPD Del Rio, KTPR Stanton, KCTI Gonzales, and K223ZZ Gonzales. It's 5 o'clock.
They wanted to know if I wanted to use their adorable, sunny, cute little laundry room as my home office. There was one catch. They asked if I could watch their lizards. Now, I hate reptiles.
Next up, The Moth Radio Hour, true stories told before a live audience. I'm your host, Jay Allison, and in this show, stories of getting in deep and trying to get back out.
I feel like the pandemic, I reached a turning point when I was having a martini with the lizards. I mean, please think about this for 1 minute. I was having a drink with Onyx and Jade.
That story and more coming up next on the Moth Radio Hour from PRX, right after this.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. President Trump is pressing ahead with tariffs despite a substantial legal setback from the Supreme Court. NPR's Kristen Wright reports he plans to raise a new tariff on global imports to 15%.
In a post on Truth Social, Trump said his decision to impose a new 15% tariff on goods from around the world is based on, quote, a thorough, detailed, and complete review of the ridiculous, poorly written, and extraordinarily anti-American decision on tariffs. The Supreme Court struck down the president's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose certain tariffs. Friday's ruling is a major blow to Trump's economic policy agenda. Initially, the president signed a proclamation hours after the ruling, imposing a new 10% tariff on global imports to revive his tariffs. He cited the Trade Act of 1974 as authorization, but they can only be in place for 150 days unless Congress acts. Kristen Wright, NPR News.
A ransomware attack on the University of Mississippi Medical Center has forced it to close all of its clinics. NPR's Alana Wise reports that's nearly 36 across the state.
The attack on their systems was launched on Thursday, forcing the closure of 35 UMMC facilities. Those shutdowns included disrupting procedures ranging from chemotherapy to elective surgeries. Officials said it was unclear how long the system outage would last. For now, medical staff were relying on paper notes to document patient statuses, while electronic portals were down. UMMC said it did not yet know to what extent patient information may or may not have been compromised, but they are working with law enforcement, including the FBI, to resolve the issue. Alana Wise, NPR News.
A major winter storm is set to hit the East Coast starting tomorrow, with heavy snow, gusty winds, and coastal flooding possible. Power outages are also possible. The National Weather Service has issued blizzard warnings for parts of several states from the mid-Atlantic to the Northeast, including New York City, which is getting its blizzard warning for the first time since 2016. Steve Kastenbaum says the city is preparing for its second major snowstorm in less than a month.
The soot-covered piles of snow had finally melted away, and now they could be replaced by close to 1.5 feet of snow by Monday. Mayor Zoran Mamdani.
These have the potential to be even more hazardous conditions than we faced the last time around.
At least 19 people died on the streets of the city during January's cold snap. The mayor said caring for the homeless will be a priority in the days ahead.
Our focus is going to be utilizing every tool that we have to connecting homeless New Yorkers with a safe haven, with a shelter, with a warming bus.
The storm will have a major impact on air travel in the Northeast. Many airlines preemptively canceled hundreds of flights. For NPR News, I'm Steve Kastenbaum in New York.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington. It's been the most successful Winter Olympics ever for American athletes. The United States has now won 11 gold medals, more than any U.S. squad at any previous Winter Games. Steve Futterman has more from Milan.
Before Milan Cortino, the best U.S. Winter Olympics as far as gold medals was the Salt Lake City Games in 2002. There, the U.S. had 10 first-place finishes. At every subsequent Winter Games, in Torino, Vancouver, Sochi, Pyeongchang, and Beijing, Americans came away with 9. On Saturday, the record-breaking 11th gold came in freestyle skiing mixed aerials. Kayla Kuhn of the U.S. team says the American squad fought hard.
For us to put things down when it really, truly matters, especially during the team event, it has not been easy, and we've all had our falls.
The U.S. still has a chance to increase its record haul. The final event is the gold medal match in men's hockey. For NPR News, I'm Steve Futterman in Milan.
NASA's attempt to launch the Artemis II lunar mission has been pushed back once again. This after another setback when the flow of helium to the rocket's upper stage was interrupted. A solid helium flow is crucial to purge the engines and pressurize the fuel tanks. Officials say this latest problem isn't related to the hydrogen leaks that forced the space agency to scrap a dress rehearsal earlier this month. NASA's next opportunity to launch 4 astronauts on a lunar mission now moves to April. I'm Janine Herbst, NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the William T. Grant Foundation, supporting research to improve the lives of young people. Online at wtgrantfoundation.org. And the listeners who support this NPR station.
From PRX, this is the Moth Radio Hour. I'm your host, Jay Allison. The proverb goes, hope for the best and prepare for the worst. But sometimes events go so profoundly awry, the best we can do is keep our heads above water. In this episode, the deep end, where all our storytellers find themselves. First up is Makosi Shimaka Mbahu, who told this story at one of our open mic story slams in Washington, D.C., where we partner with public radio station WAMU. Here's Makosi.
Okay. All right. As you heard, my name is Makosi Shimaka Mbasu. I'm from here. I was born in the Columbia Hospital for Women. I think it's a set of condos now, as I was saying before the show. That's fine. That happens. I was born to a Jamaican mother and a Kenyan father. That's only important because, as I'm sure most, if not all of you know, there are some subtleties to American society that you have to experience to understand. And given that at the time that this story takes place, neither of them were citizens, that's something that we had to navigate together. The story takes place when I was 10 years old. I was in 5th grade, just 2 or 3 miles east of here in PG County. And it was the science fair. For those of you who have competed, you understand it is a place where you demonstrate your ability to apply the scientific method. You formulate a hypothesis, you gather data, you run experiments, you collect results, and from those results you formulate a conclusion, all of which are displayed on a large trifold cardboard display. If your experiment had some sort of thing with it also, you bring that. Mine was a 4x4 large wooden frame, because my experiment, conceived of and executed by me, was to show that pulleys, single, double, and triple, will geometrically decrease the amount of weight you need to move a set amount of pounds, a set number of inches. I thought it was cool, but at 10 years old, maybe some people had different ideas. Now, I too am a lifelong person with ADHD, but that's not the hard part, right? I have medicine for that. But what I didn't know, and wouldn't for another quarter century, was that I'm also autistic. I'm on the spectrum. And due to my specific place on the spectrum, speaking to people who I don't know, have no frame of reference for, don't know who they are, where they're from, what they like. At 10 years old, that was an insurmountable task. And again, if you've been in the science fair, you understand that's all it is you are talking to a parade of stranger adults who have endless questions about this project that you've completed. So instead of seeing it as a sort of exercise in scholastic achievement, I saw it as a very mild but consistent form of torture, in that I don't know how to speak to these people and they're continually asking me questions, which I am continually stammering through and just really fumbling the ball here, if we're being honest. So as this happens, I feel as though I'm being individually persecuted because one adult comes, they ask questions, and while I have a very detailed and foundational understanding of this experiment that I took great joy in executing, I can't get the words from in my head into their ears. It's not working. I don't have the tools. I can't do it. And much to my chagrin, what would happen is they would then disappear into the crowd of adults and seemingly beckon yet another adult and send them my way to torture me further. What I found out a few years later, I guess what I came to a realization is that they were actually somewhat interested in the experiment, and they wanted to speak to this child who had single, double, and triple pulleys in a 4x4 frame. But it was the pulling of teeth and the lifting of fingernails for me at that age. And as the frustration mounted, as this endless cavalcade of adults just continually came by my project over and over. It could have been 30 minutes. It could have been 3 hours. I don't know. There was a sort of time collapse that happens when you're in the bad mental space of what I can only say is what the right? But as this ends and as I tear out of the cafeteria in tears, I'm in the counselor's office. I just can't get my proverbial stuff together. The antiquated PA system, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, chirps on and informs all of the participants to come back to the cafeteria because they are giving awards out, which I personally was ready to go home. It's 2 p.m. and I could have walked all 20 miles back to my house, but it's what you sign up for. You have to go back to the cafeteria. So we go back and I'm using my shirt, my sleeve. I'm using anything I can to just wipe the tears that cannot stop falling out of my face. And much to my surprise, one of those awards given out was mine. And not only was one of the awards mine, it was, thank you, it was the first place award, which, again, thank you, because, that is like the gold star moment, right? But in actuality, what it means is you then have to go to the high school in a bigger room with more stranger adults and do the same thing for actually longer. But I do want to focus on the actual gold star moment because that first place award meant a lot to me. And as you can tell by the fact that I'm up here, it's something that stuck with me for the rest of my life. So thank you.
Mukosi Shimaka Mbasu is a first-generation American and native Washington, D.C. resident. He says he enjoys life's moments, whatever they are, and the stories we can tell about them. We asked our storytellers in this episode what the next deep end for them might be.
I have no idea what the next deep end level challenge may be, but I'm confident, based on everything that has taken me up to this point, that I'll be ready to leap or at the very least, willingly accept the nudge when presented with it.
Our next story was told at a Story Slam, this time in Asheville, North Carolina, where we partner with Blue Ridge Public Radio. Here's Gary Sizer, live at the Moth.
Japanese knotweed is resilient, it's tough, and it's invasive. About 7 years ago, my wife and I bought a house that had sat abandoned for 5 years. And the previous owners had been very negligent about how they handled their invasives, and the yard was just full of the stuff. And we were out in the yard hacking at the knotweed with machetes when my brother called with news that Mom had fallen down and that she couldn't get back up and that they had to call an ambulance. Now, in that moment, I wasn't particularly shaken because this sort of thing had happened before. This was after she had suffered probably 4 minor strokes, I think, and one of her knees was titanium. I think the other one was 2. She was in her early 70s, but she had been volunteering at a local art gallery when this had happened. She just kind of tipped over and couldn't get herself back up. This time it was different, though, because Jim told me that after they ran some tests, they figured out that she was experiencing the early stages of ALS. Now, it sounds like most people know what that means. If you know what ALS is, you kind of know how this story is going to end. Taking care of someone who has ALS is not quite like pushing a boulder up a hill. That boulder is coming down the hill, and the best you can do is slow it down or get out of the way. This diagnosis came right around the beginning of the uptick of the COVID epidemic, so any long-term medical care or nursing home facilities was basically going to consist of putting her in a room and not seeing her again. So the family made the difficult decision, and she was very much behind this, that we were going to do this on her terms, in her house, with the family as support. So I got in my car and I drove up to Pennsylvania. Only made one stop along the way to get gas, made no other contacts with people because I didn't want to risk spreading anything. And I moved into my mother's small 2-bedroom apartment. And my brother and myself and a cousin worked shifts taking care of her as the boulder rolled down the hill. I spent weeks sleeping on the floor in her spare bedroom, and my entire existence centered around listening for the sound of a bell. Anytime that bell rang, day or night, it meant that Mom needed something. And this was an interesting arrangement because now the roles had been reversed, right? She had brought me into this world, and she had taken care of me and raised me and changed my diaper, and now we were doing this for her. And it was incredibly difficult. Over the weeks, it became apparent that this boulder was going to roll down the hill very quickly. Some people contract ALS. We're all familiar with Stephen Hawking is a terrific example, lived for decades with this ailment. Mom lost weight very quickly lost the ability to speak, to move. Her dentures were a choking hazard, so those had to come out. And in less time than anyone imagined, this beautiful, intelligent woman who had raised us and taken care of us was now a toothless skeleton who could only groan and point at things. We got her one of those computer screens that you could blink at and type a message, but her eyesight was poor and that didn't work, so she was restricted to just writing things on a notepad. Now, despite all of this, she still kept her spirit. She still was the same beautiful and intelligent person on the inside. Her spirit was still there. And there was one instance in particular that I remember. I'd just finished changing her bedclothes or arranging pillows or something, and I'd been leaning over her and moving her around in the bed, and it was very strenuous, and I could tell by her face that something was bothering her, and she needed something else. And I said, Mom, what is it? What else could I possibly do for you? And she started making these motions with her hands, and it reminded me of, do you remember that there was a magician in the 70s and 80s, Doug Henning, who did the illusion of magic? It was like that kind of thing. I thought she was telling me that the angels were coming, and I said, Mom, what is it? And she motioned for her notepad, and she wrote, "You need a shower." Okay, so she's still in there. But that was one of the few high points during this ordeal. Not long after that, one night when I was with her by myself, we were holding hands and just talking about life, and she confessed to me that she wanted to die. She begged me to put a pillow over her face. I said, Mom, I can't do that. I'll get in so much trouble. But she really meant it. And it was a sincere, heartfelt moment that just crushed me. And I remember, I think it must have been that morning or the following morning. It was not too long after that. I was on the floor in the spare bedroom when the weight of everything that was going on hit me. The importance of what I was doing. This was the most important thing I had ever done. And it was doomed to fail. There was no way to succeed. And something inside me broke, and the boulder rolled over me. I've had panic attacks before, but this was like the walls were melting, and I was watching myself from the ceiling, and I could see my cousin rush in to comfort me. And I have very few memories of that incident, but they told me that I was speaking in tongues, and I lost it. I broke. And the next thing I remember was my father-in-law, who lived in a city about an hour away, had come to take me. And before I left, my mom, I remember that she touched my hair, and she gave me the ASL sign for I love you. And I said, I'll be back. And I went home thinking that, in 2 weeks I'll recover. And, I saw my doctor, and I'd been diagnosed with a mild psychotic break, and they put me on some sedatives. And about 2 weeks later, I got a second phone call from my brother. And he said, we were giving Mom a bath, and she was in the warm water, and she exhaled and never inhaled again. And that was it. I never saw her again. So I made it back for the funeral, and then I came back here, and for about 2 weeks I was just numb. And then I remember one day I was sitting at home alone, and this is very soon after all of this had just unfolded. And I was probably just staring at a wall. I don't know what I was thinking, probably nothing. And I heard the sound of a dog barking in the distance. One of our neighbors has one of those dogs that makes a noise like a screwdriver to the ears. And it just really started to aggravate me. And it filled me with rage. And I knew that if I didn't get out of the house, I was going to break something or do something that I regretted. So I went onto the porch and I found the machete, and I went into the yard and I found some knotweed, and I began hacking and slashing and pounding the earth with this machete. And I was bellowing with rage, making the sound of a monster from your nightmares. And I screamed until my throat was raw. And I lifted the blade and I hacked at the earth until my elbow was swollen and my shoulder was numb and my hands were bleeding. And in my mind's eye, every strike of this blade was about to split the earth in half. But all it did was just bounce off the ground, and nothing happened until there was nothing left in me and I collapsed. And I just exhaled and hung my head with my hair hanging in my face. And it was good. Because in that moment I knew that I was alive. And that I was strong. And once again, I could feel.
That was Gary Sizer. Gary writes travel comedies and narrates audiobooks. He is working on his next book while living in Montenegro with his wife, Sasha, and their cat, Chester. Gary told us that this experience influenced how he defines a deep end and says that it changed his perception of what's inconvenient and what's truly important. We asked him about his next deep end.
I'm in the deep end now. I've spent the last year selling or donating anything that wouldn't fit in a suitcase. And 2 months ago, I left the U.S. with no concrete plans to return.
We also asked him how he's feeling these days.
Things are going pretty great. I live in a beautiful place with the person I love most. I eat good food, breathe clean air, and enjoy the weather, even the rain, every single day.
In a moment, a charity swimathon and the wisdom of lizards when the Moth Radio Hour continues.
Support for The Moth comes from Odoo. Odoo streamlines every aspect of your company in one simple and efficient business management platform. More information at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com. And by Progressive Insurance. Keep your career moving forward with growth opportunities, competitive compensation, and healthcare benefits. Go to careers.progressive.com and apply today.
Moth Radio Hour is produced by Atlantic Public Media in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, and presented by PRX.
For decades, REM made thoughtful and inventive music while doing its best to live by ethical principles.
The fact that they're not trying to sort of assert themselves into the world now, all these years later, speaks well of their original intentions.
We talk with biographer Peter Ames Carlin about the music and legacy of REM this week on Sound Opinions.
Coming up at 6 this evening on Texas Public Radio.
From PRX, this is the Moth Radio Hour. I'm Jay Allison. In the show, we're hearing stories of deep ends about facing challenges we're unprepared for. Our next storyteller went literal with her deep end. Claire Walder told us at a story slam in Melbourne, Australia. Here's Claire, live from the Moth.
It's the mid-1970s, and in a small town in rural central west New South Wales, at the local school, the sports ground is just a patch of hard red dirt, and teams are being picked, usually for softball, but sometimes, even worse, volleyball. And as always, there is one kid left over, and that's me. I can't run, I can't catch, I can't throw, and I'm slower than a wet week. Now, there are those of you out there who will say to me that team sports are great for developing leadership skills and encouraging kids to work together. But for those of us who are always picked last, it is embarrassing, it's pointless, and it's boring. Now the game starts, and I know where to go. To the outfield, where I'll stand staring at the sky, waiting for the odd ball to dribble my way. But all that is about to change, because the town where I live is officially the most charitable town in New South Wales, and they give more in real terms than any of those rich, posh suburbs in Sydney. And we are going to have a swimathon, and we're going to raise money for the guide dogs or the Red Cross or something. And kids are going to be sponsored to swim 40 laps of the local 25-metre pool. And in an era when an ice cream costs 5 cents and the going rate per lap is 2 cents, my dad has agreed to sponsor me 20 cents. Now, in case you think my dad's being generous, he's not. He's being cheap, because he has spoken to my mother and said, "So, how far do you reckon she can swim?" And Mum says, "Oh, she's pretty hopeless. I don't know, 3, maybe 4 laps at the most." And lest you think my father is being encouraging, I'd like you to remind you that this is the mid-70s in rural New South Wales, and that sort of namby-pamby new age parenting bullshit is not coming into vogue for another 20 years. But I am encouraged. And on the day of the swimathon, we make the hot walk from school down to the local pool. Now, the rules of a swimathon are fairly simple. You jump in one end, you swim to the other end, you climb out, you walk back, get your name marked off, repeat. And off we go. And of course, soon the faster kids, they're beating me. But it doesn't matter because it's not a race. All I have to do is keep on swimming